Often, the heavens door against truth behaviorism and structuralism in learning. Introduction. We are concerning the condition in a very involved gap between education and psychology. Human behavior should be tested related to memory and learning. Actually, how to memorize and interpret information we get has been not observed as correct ways. If it is revealed, we may realize that our brain functions very rapidly. Memory and behaviorism. The scientific investigation of association formation began with the work of a German scientist, Hermann Ebbinghaus, whose pioneering research was published in History on Memory. Behaviorism is a positivist philosophy which argues that all that observers can ever know about other persons or animals is provided by close observations of their overt actions or behaviors in specific situations. Memory, behavior, and cognition. We consider now another vital conceptual distinction that must be made in the study of memory. The distinction yet another dichotomy, which we know that scientists love even if nature does not, pits pure action against pure thought or behavior against cognition. People and other animals can acquire through learning and memory a wide variety of behavior that are useful for their survival. They can also acquire a great deal of knowledge about the world in which they live and survive, and in which they practice their learned behaviors along with innately determined ones. Encoding and delivery of information. The terms encoding and delivery have their origins in the information processing framework of the 1960s, which characterized the human mind-brain as an information processing device. In this model, the mind, like the computer, receives informational input that it retains for a variable duration and subsequently output in some meaningful forms. Encoding, therefore, refers to the process of acquiring information or placing it into memory, whereas retrieval refers to the process of recovering previously encoded information. However, this early work focused less on encoding and retrieval than it did on storage or retention of information. Thinking and reasoning. What is thinking? We can start to answer this question by looking at the various ways the word thinking is used in everyday language. I think that water is necessary for life, and George thinks the Pope is a communist. Both express beliefs, that is, explicit claims of what someone takes to be a truth about the world. Anne is sure to think of the solution carries us into the realm of problem solving the mental construction of an action plan to achieve a goal. The problem of induction. In its classic formulation, due to Hume, inductive reasoning is an activity of the mind that takes us from the observed to the unobserved. From the fact that the sun has risen every day thus far, we conclude that it will rise again tomorrow. From the fact that bread has nourished us in the past, we conclude that it will nourish us in the future. The essence of inductive reasoning lies in its ability to take us beyond the confines of our current evidence or knowledge to novel conclusions about the unknown. Analogy. Analogy is a special kind of similarity. Two situations are analogous if they share a common pattern of relationships among their constituent elements, even though the elements themselves differ across two situations. Typically, one analog times the source or base is more familiar or better understood than the second analog times the target. This asymmetry in initial knowledge provides a basis for analogical transfer using the source to generate inferences about the target. Decision making. People make countless decisions every day, ranging from ones that are barely noticed and soon forgotten. What should I drink with lunch? What should I watch on TV? To others that are highly consequential. How should I invest my retirement funds? Should I marry this person? In addition to having practical significance, decision-making plays a central role in many academic disciplines. Virtually all the social sciences, including psychology, sociology, economics, political science, and law, rely on models of decision-making behavior. This combination of practical and scholarly factors has motivated great interest in how decisions are and should be made. Problem solving. People are confronted with problems on a daily basis, such as extracting a broken light bulb from a socket, multiplying 8 times 7, finding the roots of a quadratic equation, planning a family vacation, and deciding whom to vote for in the presidential election. Given that the problem has been identified, the nature of people's background knowledge pertaining to that problem has important implications for the solution-related thinking they do. To understand this thinking, it is important to distinguish, first, the solver's representation of the problem, and second, the sequence of steps the solver takes to get from the given situation to the goal. Creativity. Creativity is the ability to produce work that is novel, original, unexpected, high in quality, and appropriate, useful, meets task constraints. Creativity is a topic of wide scope that is important at both the individual and social levels for a wide range of task domains. At the individual level, creativity is relevant, for example, when solving problems on the job and in daily life. At social level, creativity can lead to new scientific findings, new movements in art, new inventions, and new social programs. The economic importance of creativity is clear because new products or services create jobs. Furthermore, individuals, organizations, and societies must adapt existing resources to changing task demands to remain competitive. Language and thinking. We must ask a question on the relation between language and thinking in a developed way. Then it has not been observed that language developments connect to thinking developments in learning. If we have already gained simple structures of language, it will advance the thinking skills of judgment, inductions, problem solving, and creativity through language we have in mind. There is a hypothesis that these thinking abilities may develop as the usage of language. The mistakes of usages and interpretations in thinking might happen. Usage-based and form-focused learning. Learners' understanding of language and how it works is based upon their experience of language. A language is not a fixed system. It varies in usage over speakers, places, and time. Yet despite the fact that no two speakers on an identical language, communication is possible to the degree that they share construction relevant to their discourse. Language learners have to acquire these constructions from usage, and beginners don't have much to work on in building the foundations for basic interpersonal communication. Native-like fluency, idiomaticity, and selection are another level of difficulty again. Syllabus design. Syllabus design is based essentially on the decision about the units of classroom activity and the sequence in which they are to be performed. The syllabus thus formalizes the content to be learned in a domain of language, knowledge, or behavior, and arranges this content in a succession of interim objectives. Language teaching. In discussions of how to teach second and foreign languages, it is useful to distinguish between methodological principles and pedagogical procedures. While first introduced as part of proposals for task-based language teaching, the distinction is helpful when describing any approach to language teaching. Evaluation criteria are the standards by which proposals can be judged. Language learning needs in a task-based approach. When it comes to curriculum design for second language education, two basic questions are usually asked by teachers and syllabus designers. What should language learners learn, and how can language learners be stimulated to learn whatever they are supposed to learn? A third question, which may be equally important from the learner's point of view, but which is very often overlooked except in the field of language education for specific purposes, is why. Exploring task effects. In our recent research, we have been using tasks as a stimulus for generating talk among students. We have been interested in discovering whether through outputs, learners notice gaps in their linguistic knowledge, triggering analysis of input or existing internal resources to fill those gaps. Whether learner's output serves as a hypothesis of how to convey their intended meaning, and whether learners use language to reflect on their own language use, that is, whether learners externalize to scrutiny and discussion. For a new theory to open a heaven's door, pedagogy as communicative methods and task-based language teaching have been significant in the way of acquiring a second language effectively. Behaviorism and structuralism are now old-fashioned. Therefore, we must find a new way to teach languages through a skills learners have. In fact, issues are apparent. Language teaching methods may have different views in learning, which will have individual differences. For psychological issues are applied, there are fundamental elements in setting how thinking will work. Then it is important to relate to connection between language usages and thinking as induction of logics, judgments, and decisions. It means that language usages have a frame of information as native-like phrases to think in English, which brings us an issue of bilingualism, to live in two societies, having the self